How to avoid being an embarrassing biker. Watch this video. Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. I hope you're all well. Very quick video here. Let's just talk about the big biker mistakes and how to avoid making these mistakes and how to avoid, being embarrassing in front of your biker chums, as it were. Right. There are lots of things that we all do that you think, oh, that was a bit embarrassing, right? But there are lots of things that is just stupidity, right? The things that you do and you think, oh, God, why am I doing that? And people will look at you. Now, some people might think, Aki, dropping my bike in front of people, that's really embarrassing. Okay, it might be embarrassing in the moment, but I don't think many people are going to think that it's an embarrassing act. There's a difference here. It might be embarrassing for you to say, oh, I've just dropped my bike, or I've just, whatever, slid my bike off the road and, had a little tumble or something like that. You think, oh, that's a bit embarrassing. But that's not what I'm talking about, because most of the bikers will kind of just help you and they'll just get you to your feet as well. Yeah, they might rib you a little bit, but at the same time, it's all good fun. Nobody's going to really think that's an embarrassing thing. I'm talking about doing embarrassing things or witnessing embarrassing behavior, and it's just not looked upon as a good thing. So what are these embarrassing behaviors? Well, I suppose it really depends in which circles you move, right? And what you do. So for some people, what you wear and what you ride, there has to be some kind of connection there. Because if you don't have the right motorcycle to suit the right kind of clothing, motorcycle clothing I'm talking about, then, people start thinking, well, that's a bit embarrassing. You look like a bit of a knob. Now, what I'm trying to say here is, I'm not saying this about the protective equipment itself, but let's just say you're wearing, a full race suit, for example, and you've got the race hump on the back, and you've got the racing gloves and the racing boots and a racing helmet. You look as if you should be riding a 1000cc speed rocket, and you're only riding a 125. Now, I don't want to put people off putting on protective equipment, let's put it that way. But at the same time, there's a mismatch there, right? There's a mismatch between what the old Power Ranger thing, you should be riding a speed rocket, a really fast bike, because you want to emulate, the races on the track. And you think that that's the best kind of protection for you as well. But you're riding really kind of entry level small bike. So it kind of doesn't work, if you know what I mean. So for me, I would find that a little bit embarrassing. I would scoff at it. I mean, would I say to somebody, look, that's really embarrassing, you got to take that off? No, of course I wouldn't. And I don't think many people would either. But I think a lot of people would be kind of going, that's a bit embarrassing, right? But there are other things people do. Things that when people always do something that puts them in a certain light, and it isn't really them. They put on a false image. They do something that draws attention to them. And, other people think, oh, God, what an arsehole. That kind of thing, whatever it is, because there's so many different things, we could be here all day talking about it. But if you're doing something that brings unwanted attention to yourself, or you just putting on an act for other people, and it just isn't you, then people will see through that pretty quickly, and they'll be like, oh, that's embarrassing. You're a bit of an embarrassing. You're an embarrassment to yourself, and all things like that. You don't need to act like that. So there's lots of things that people could see in other people, and they think, oh, that's a bit embarrassing, right? But it's more about what people say and what people do, rather than any action in terms of on their motorcycle. As I say, if you accidentally drop your bike as you're going into a rally site, I've been to so many rally sites, right, where the entrance into the rally site is really, there's lots of holes. So when you try and put your foot down, you go, whoop, whoop, it's a long way to go. And it can be really unsteady, unstable, especially if you're loaded up with bags or whatever. There's two up of you. It can be quite difficult at times. I'm not saying all rally sites, of course, but it can be quite difficult. And you could easily lose your footing. Yeah, I've seen lots of bikes go over. Yeah, and it's a little bit embarrassing as well. But at the same time, there's also people there who don't find it embarrassing. They just help you pick up your bike. So there's lots of things that happen that are not embarrassing, but there are lots of things that you can do that you'd be like, oh, embarrassing. Now, people, they can get really drunk, let's say. They can do things, or they can be taking other stuff. And they can do stupid things, in that condition as well. Now, some people will just find it funny. Some people they find it really embarrassing. But it really depends on what level they take it to, and then does it become an embarrassment, rather than embarrassing? Are they an embarrassment to themselves? Are they an embarrassment to the group of people, their club, whatever it is? That kind of thing. Are they doing something that really sullies the name of whomever they're with? Are they doing something that everybody else thinks, you know what, you really shouldn't be doing that? There are other things that, you could say is an embarrassment. Now, I don't know how true this is, so I'm going to kind of refrain by laying this on as some kind of factual evidence, right? But what I deem as an embarrassment as a biker is where you would do something to other bikers that you wouldn't want done to yourself. So there are situations. Let's say you go to motorcycle rallies, motorcycle events, right? And things get stolen from your bike, from your tent, whatever, from your saddlebags. Your helmet gets stolen, whatever it is. Your bike, sometimes your motorcycle gets stolen, right? Thankfully, this very rarely happens, but it can happen. And that, for me, is real embarrassment. You're just an embarrassment to bikers. You're an embarrassment to yourself. In fact, you're an embarrassment to humanity, really, in my opinion, right? So I can't say how often this happens, but when I've heard of it happening, I'm thinking, it kind of sickens me to my core. I think, you really are an embarrassment. I mean, there are other things where people, in terms of the motorcycle world, but this can happen in all sorts of society. And I've made videos about this recently where I would say, getting negative attention from people at motorcycle rallies, it very rarely happens, right? I've never really seen it. They're a really nice group of people who, for the most part, will just keep themselves to themselves. Even if you don't know them, some will engage with you, some won't, but nobody's going to be, negative towards you, really. But, of course, sometimes it can happen, right? This is the world we live in. This is, we're all adults here. We know these things can happen. And when I see that happening, I just say, you're an embarrassment. You're an embarrassment to yourself. You're an embarrassment to your friends. You're an embarrassment to, but, especially if you're doing something that it's negatively affecting somebody else. I just think, well, you're an embarrassment, really. So there's lots of things. It's the actions that people do and whether it has a negative effect on other people. That's what I think is an embarrassment. But say there are lots of other things that people do. I've done so many of these things, right, that are embarrassing. Say if you're dressing. I mean, there was a big thing a few years ago, wasn't it? If you were dressing like you're in a motorcycle club, but you're not. That's embarrassing. In fact, that can get you into trouble, of course. Certainly if you're wearing any kind of fake emblems and colours and patches, whatever, that you've just got off eBay or AliExpress or somewhere like that, people are not going to be too kind about that, are they? Again, this comes back to being something that you're not, pretending to be something that you're not. We had the whole Sons of Anarchy thing a few years ago, didn't we? Where people were in that and people were, just taking it upon themselves to say something to these people. I mean, personally, I wouldn't. I would just be like, it's a TV show. I don't give a toss. You know what I mean? But there we go. So I just think that people do embarrassing things, and sometimes they can just step over the line, if you know what I mean. They just go that one thing that you really shouldn't do. And I say, there are some things that people do, and you think you're an embarrassment to the motorcycle fraternity or sorority or whatever it is, the community, whatever label you want to call it. And I don't like it, and I'm sure many other people don't like it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like what I do here, keep on watching the videos. Don't forget you go to the website RevelatorAlf.com for books, merchandise, t-shirts, that kind of stuff. And with that, I'll catch you again. Another video coming very soon. Hopefully, I won't be embarrassing myself too much. Catch you again. Bye now.